Okay, our next presenter is Aaron Weiss. Aaron is a Western philosopher concerned with taking non-Western thought seriously in the effort to bring about a new relation between humans and the places they live and die in. He's working on his PhD in philosophy and religion with a concentration in Asian and comparative studies at CIIS. He's privileged to find home equally among the blustery bluffs of Pacifica as on the sunny sidewalks of Berkeley. His title today is A Cosmology of Love and Death, Lessons Learned in the Bardo. So let's welcome Aaron.
Thank you. I want to also thank, besides all of you, I want to thank all the presenters who've gone before. It's hard to be up here, and you've all done very well. I've really appreciated everything that's been said so far today and yesterday. And I consider it auspicious that Mercurius was invoked before I came up here, as I'm here to talk about, or to speak within, the Bardo, space between. I presented here once before in 2008, and this year I wish to speak about things that I've learned since then, in the time between then and now, in the Bardo between 2008 and 2012. But I'm still on my way here. I haven't, in fact, even finished my notes. So hopefully you can complete it with me. Just have more caffeine, I think everything will become much more coherent. I want to thank, in particular, Randall Lynn Christensen for bringing us together to discuss this auspicious subject.
Am I in trouble?
The possibility of a cosmology of love. Well, we'll see. In the first Cosmology of Love conference in 2008, Rand asked those present to consider what would happen in our culture and in our personal lives if we held as our fundamental assumption that the cosmos is made of love, by love, for love. He claimed that by viewing the cosmos in this way, we might ignite a spark of discovery that could bring about a revolutionary transformation. But seeing the possibility for an imbalance in our thinking, if we were to interpret love too rationalistically or too metaphysically, that is to say, in an onto-theological manner, as we say in the trade. Seeing that possibility for imbalance, I chose to meditate on the theme of love and wildness. As I said then, and I quote, quote, "One of the first things that comes to mind when thinking about a cosmology of love is the strangeness of attempting to explain an already mysterious cosmos in terms of love, which is perhaps as strange as anything could be, stranger even. By suggesting that the wilderness is a product of love, we seem to be explaining one obscure thing by a second thing even more obscure. I think this problem is going to remain with us for as long as we interpret the cosmology of love as a question of metaphysics, as long as we think of love as a substance out of which objects are made. As for me, I love love too much to make of it a thing or principle, because I find love to be wild, containing in its heart a great wildness, and that when we regard people and things lovingly, they shake off their habitual personness and thingness and become wildness itself, which is out of control, disruptive, and sublimely, heartbreakingly beautiful. The more I love the cosmos, the stranger it becomes. The more I view the world under the auspices of radical love, the more I find myself disoriented and disrupted, interrupted. I become eccentric, bewildered, shaken from my privileged center, beckoned into extravagant, insane generosity, Love is an ecstatic affirmation of otherness, unquote. In the spirit of that deconstructive approach, I confessed that I didn't believe that love is best understood as the ultimate stuff of the cosmos. This isn't because I don't think that love is cosmic, but because I want to resist the reduction of the cosmos to any abstract stuff at all, however sublime a word we give it. In line with my aversion to most forms of monism and univocity, I sought to balance the notion of a unitive and totalized cosmology of love, what has been called the new story, with the insight that love is an inherently disruptive event. Love, I said, quote, is the movement of disruption, the disruption of equilibrium that gives rise to phenomena, yes, but also the continuation of disruption as the process of revealing what we took to be present phenomena as in fact just effects of habit and convention. Yes, yes, unquote. I interpreted the cosmos as a byproduct of our loving pursuit of what is most real and whatever exceeds our grasp. I argued that to attach ourselves to the cosmos is thus to fall into forgetfulness of reality. This year, Rand is back at it again. He has repeated, even more explicitly this time, his view that the Earth community stands in need of a capital N new, comprehensive, or holistic capital S story, which unites science with the world's wisdom traditions. The cosmology of love, as he sees it, is an attempt to articulate this new story. Now, here, 2012, having already lovingly deconstructed a substantialist and univocal mode of cosmologizing back in 2008, this year I will try to meet my beloved friend, Rand, halfway. This time I will respond more directly to Rand's desire for naming and for narrative. For I must humbly admit that I, too, yearn for an alternative to the world we live in, and that I seem to catch glimpses of it in stories. But this is not an admission of defeat. As in my last presentation for the Cosmology of Love, I will respond to Rand's loving request in the mode of eccentricity, with an eye toward what gives the story without ever being revealed in it. But this year, having lived a little more, since 2008, I will respond in a more contemplative mode, one that is certainly erotic, but also mindful of divine sorrow. As you'll see, the erotic and sorrowful have a hidden connection. But first, a question. Just how may we divine a new story while remaining respectful of love's disruptive, differentiating power? I ask how to divine a new story because I wish to invoke a divinatory consciousness, a mode of receptivity having none of the narrowness and arrogance of the demand for clear and distinct representations of the cosmos in the abstract space of fixed concepts. Such a strategy is the strategy of colonizers. Rather, I suggest that we wait together for messages from a dark mirror, infinitely black, reflecting not the likeness of our habitual selves, but all of the unlikenesses of a cosmos beyond linguistic reckoning. Okay, divination and contemplation. In ancient Roman culture, priests called augurs used to read the movements of birds in the sky, called auspices, for indications as to how best to proceed in any important matter. The great first-century historian of Rome, Titus Livius Patavinus, or Livy as he's known today, wrote of augurs and taking auspices the following, quote, "Who does not know that this city, Rome, was founded only after taking the auspices, that everything in war and in peace, at home and abroad, was done only after taking the auspices?" Those of you who saw Hiroko's talk yesterday might see a resonance with Kyoto. Now, the area on the ground which the augur traced with his staff in order to carry out this sacred observation was called the templum. In Old English, this word then became used figuratively to denote an edifice or place regarded as a dwelling place or house of one or several deities. This is our word, temple. Intensifying the word templum with the prefix con, Latin speakers developed the word contemplare, meaning to observe carefully. This gives us our word to contemplate. So temple and contemplation have a hidden relation in our language. I was alerted to this etymology by my undergraduate mentor, Arthur Versluis, who, mindful of this linguistic legacy, interpreted contemplation as careful observation within sacred space. This divinatory and finally contemplative mode of seeing, mode of being, is to me suggestive of a way to bring together the deconstructive and cosmological or cosmogenetic elements of Eros. Cosmology, in the broadened and enriched sense of the word a cosmology of love connotes, refers to an emplacement, an understanding of the nature of space and time which brings us home. To contemplate, that is, to lovingly observe with the awareness of being within sacred space, is thus an apt method for cosmologizing, as I understand it. Accordingly, I humbly ask all of you here that as you hear the phrase cosmology of love, you might consider it as a reminder to relax any urge to come to a conclusion about the nature of the cosmos, to fix the cosmos within your words. Instead, I invite us all to understand the cosmology of love as an attempt to reframe our cosmology and our ecology, the story of our home, logos oikos, in terms that address our desire for communion while maintaining a respectful and tactful deference to the subject of our love. Don't try to insist on the new story. Okay? So now from Eros to Penthos. As would-be contemplatives, I'm a would-be contemplative, maybe you might be contemplatives, I don't know. As would-be contemplatives seeking a cosmology of love, how do we enter into sacred space that we may observe the cosmos carefully and listen with proper respect for its many voices? One gateway is the tears of contemplative sorrow. What kind of sorrow is this? It has been called penthos, a Greek word for mourning. I learned it from the poet and philosopher Tim Lilburn, who noted these definitions of penthos. Irene Hauscher, a historian, defined penthos as mourning that may arise from the loss of relatives or friends, sadness over any mishap, lamentation for a dead god. Gregory of Nyssa said, penthos is a sorrowful disposition of the soul caused by the privation of something desirable. Tim Lilburn continues this. He says, penthos is the state to which desire comes as it presses toward what language cannot circumscribe, divinity or wilderness. Penthos is not the extinction of Eros, but the form of its continuance. This is the sense of contemplative sorrow I wish to emphasize. In his essay, Sorrow, the River, a meditation on the South Saskatchewan River, Lilburn writes the following, quote, in their largeness, complexity, dissimilarity, things are properly addressed by awe, by gratitude for the generosity of their proximity. Names whose prelude is awe are tentative, are acquiescent to their own withdrawal. They possess courtesy, and because this courtesy, this softness, is this amenability to alteration and reversal, is the residue in language of wonder, these names are true. Not in the sense that they map a thing, but that they possess an apt decorum. They do not lie. They do not presume. It's one sentence. Did you get all that? But why tears? At the forefront of our cosmologizing, of course, is an erotic desire for communion. But this Eros speaks in many ways, wonderful, pleasurable, and also sorrowful. Our Eros is sorrowful in part because, as Lilburn puts it, we are lonely for where we are. We yearn for place. We yearn for place. But at the same time, we have all felt the pain of being put in our place. Home, it turns out, is a place not only for rest, but also for disciplined work. A place that not only allows us the pleasure of play and celebration, but also demands our respectful maintenance. Not only joy, but also humility is a cardinal virtue for the cosmologist of love. Humility, of course, comes from the Latin humus, ground, earth, dirt. We're clearing the ground in order to put down roots as we reach out to the vastness of cosmic space. You see, the hexaity, the just thisness of the cosmos, is not uncovered through thinking more cleverly, with reference to more books, or through setting up more sophisticated experimental protocol, or through creatively synthesizing modern science with traditional belief systems. Beautiful and enriching those activities may be in themselves. The mere exercise of the intellect will not suffice for the purposes of a cosmology of love. To lovingly contemplate the cosmos, we must inhabit our sorrow. Our wounds, acting as organs of sight, are sometimes better suited to the darknesses of the cosmos than our light-hungry eyes can be. Why is this? I will offer two responses. Well, my notes go part of the way towards that. First, in carefully observing my own sorrow, especially in moments of great poignancy and initiatory challenge, I have developed a more acute sensitivity to my relatedness with other beings. Suffering, as I have experienced it in those moments, is a key to establishing a deeply felt, living, ethico-cosmological sensibility. Through such experiences, I have come to realize that sorrow is just as cosmic as love is. Sorrow is the ground in which the seeds of compassion and kindness take root. My notes don't really communicate the vividness with which I have experienced this. I had an episode, some of you were present for it a few years ago, in which, within a context of a kind of sort of quasi-ceremonial container, I suppose, I was brought face to face with a profound sense of dissatisfaction and a profound sense of the burden of being quite fearful. And I felt deeply alone in that time. I felt like everybody else around me had things together more than I did, or saw the truth, somehow didn't have the same hang-ups. It was extremely lonely and frightful. But as that experience reached a fevered pitch, something strange happened, where all of a sudden, I don't know how it happened, but all of a sudden I felt that this immense pain and fear that I felt in myself, that I was carrying this for everyone around me, human and non-human, all the plants and the trees and the insects, the creek, the ravine that I was in, the sunlight. I felt that extremely vividly. It was not a metaphor. So there was an amazing sort of openness and new strength that came in that. That's what I'm trying to refer to. I know it's possible because there it was, it happened. Okay. So that's one response to this question about why tears. But then another one, to take it back to Tim Wilburn, the infinite vastness of the divine on one hand, and the infinite particularity of the piece of driftwood on the beach outside my house on the other hand. Both entirely exceed my understanding. In my effort to understand them, I have found that I cannot have them as I anticipated having them when I was younger, setting out on this philosophical journey. A sorrow often arises in me in those moments because I thirst so much for knowledge. But what I've learned from contemplative traditions, the medieval Christian mystics and their followers, and so many other contemplative traditions, is to see that sorrow as itself potentially virtuous, because it's not a sorrow that dampens my Eros. It's a mode of that erotic engagement. Who was it? Maybe it was Anonymous who said, "Beat with your naked intent upon the cloud of unknowing." So this is not just an ordinary sadness or depression. The spirit of sadness drives away our tears, said one desert father, where tears are this prayerfulness wherein the grace of the divine is able to operate. I have used up my time to take us this far, so I suppose I have to stop here. I have 3 minutes. Shit. My notes ended a couple paragraphs ago. So it would be great if I had a beautiful cosmological narrative or story to give you now that I've affirmed that I'm okay with narration. But instead, I guess it's a prolegomena to cosmological narration. I wanted to kind of lay out these principles or suggestions and requests. So thanks for listening.
A couple minutes for responses? Just thank you. I feel so much gratitude for for articulating so beautifully a wound that I feel such profound kinship with you in holding. Thank you.
Really appreciate that a lot.
Might I respond?
Okay.
In 2008, it was important for me to be metaphysical.
Yeah.
And I don't see love as a substance, but as a dynamic force of power.
Yeah.
And what I was noting in the first conference was just a relationship that I saw between the three great traditions of love in the Western civilization of Eros, Philia, and Agape, and how they seem to match up pretty closely with the three cosmogenetic principles of autopoiesis, differentiation, and communion. And I was inspired by Haridas Chowdhury, who said, we need a worldview that takes our highest aspirations and relates them to the essential structure of the universe. And so I agree with all your critiques and that balance. But I just want to make sure you understood that I'm not a substantialist so much.
Well, thank you, Rand. I was really worried about this. No, you're a beautiful teacher, and I don't doubt your understanding, but sometimes I doubt mine. And so I had to come up here and sort of offer some cautions to myself in your presence.
Thank you.